We're starting. Welcome, everyone. My name is Sowmiya Sivakumar. I'm a third-year industrial engineering student at Ryerson University, which is also where I attended the Layton School of Leadership. As a young engineering student, I'm extremely passionate about being an inclusive educator. I believe that every child deserves the opportunity to learn about the discrimination faced in our community, and education is the gateway to a better quality of life. I've also been striving to implement my own initiative in the field of science, technology, engineering, and math, commonly known as STEM. The project is Kids in STEM and Activism that I've been working in at various schools and organizations. I've achieved this using my leadership, public speaking, and mentoring skills to educate young students about the injustices faced in our society through enjoyable STEM-related activities. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Jill Andrews for a Layton short. This short is part of the Social Justice During COVID-19 series put on by the Jack Layton Chair. Dr. Jill Andrews, PhD, is the MPP for Toronto St. Paul's, the NDP cultural critic, and the women's issues critic for the official opposition, and also the co-founder of #SizeismSUCKS. She is the first Black and queer person to be elected to the Ontario legislature and reportedly in Canada. Thank you, Jill, for being here today.
Thank you so much, Sowmiya, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
I just wanted to just put it out there that these sounds we're hearing is due to Jill's computer. It's not on her side today, unfortunately. But yeah, so let's just get started, right? So can you give me an overall description of the work that you do and tell me what you're currently working on?
Got it. So, as a member of provincial parliament, I have the distinct honor of being responsible for every single life in Toronto St. Paul's, and that's way over 100,000 lives. So that's quite the honor. As a member of the official opposition and also a member of the Ontario NDP Black Caucus, I'm not only working on women's issues or on arts and culture, but I'm also a staunch advocate, I should say, trying to address anti-Black racism, working hard to address anti-Indigenous racism, and really looking at communities that have been made more vulnerable, made more marginalized by systems of oppression, whether we're talking economic institutions, whether we're talking education, whether we're looking at healthcare, whether we're looking at policing, all kinds of institutions, often don't work for those who are, who are Black, who are Indigenous, who are racialized, who are disabled, who are deaf. So it's really important for us to work hard to not only raise our voice and raise awareness, but push our forward provincial government to look at making real, tangible change. And in a setting like the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, tangible change really does look like creating bills, having bills and motions pass that recognize and value lived experience of all Ontarians. And I would argue, especially those that have been historically marginalized. So there's a lot of work going on in that sphere. Currently we continue to fight for things like pay equity, especially at a time like this, right, with COVID-19, where we're seeing, women, many of our PSWs, many of our respiratory therapists, predominantly women, oftentimes predominantly racialized women, many of our essential workers, are looking for their hazard pay, for goodness sakes. They're looking for, not handouts from the province, but what they deserve, what they have earned, what they have a right to, and so as opposition, it's our job to keep that fight, keep Ford's feet to the fire and deliver as best we can. So that's a little bit about me as an MPP. Before that, I had the wonderful pleasure of working in education for many years, whether that was as a child and youth worker or, short term as a high school teacher or an equity advisor, or even being a student myself. Navigating graduate school, for goodness sakes, is quite a journey in itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
those same macro, oppressions that we talk about in the world can also sometimes rear their ugly head, against students
Mm-hmm.
in post-secondary institutions.
Yeah.
So, the fight is real, the struggle is real. And I think that, our journey towards liberation, it has to include everyone. I've been reflecting a lot on what's going on, politically, what's going on, as we're surrounded by not only COVID-19 related deaths, like it's one thing to have a health pandemic in that sense, but also a white supremacist pandemic,
Yeah.
been living in forever,
Mm-hmm.
so we can't not address that one as well too,
For sure.
Mm.
How did you come to do this work?
Oh my goodness. That's, whew, how did I come to do this work? I think for me, the work of advocacy, I'll just sort of put it under an umbrella term, because for me, I don't see, how do I say it? I'm still wearing the title of educator,
Uh-huh.
I still feel like I'm just in another level of education. You know what I mean? Like I'm still learning, I'm still teaching in some sense. I feel like politics is just another platform for which we can educate and raise awareness and commit actions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still kind of getting used to the politician title. I mean, it's been 2 years since June 7th. It was 2 years, but I'm still getting used to it.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I think a lot of the work that I've done, whether in body justice or size, diversity, looking at anti-Black racism, looking at gender-based violence, looking at anti-bullying, for instance. I think a lot of it has stemmed from my own personal experience.
Yeah.
All people who are like, oh, how do I become an activist, or how do I get involved? My thing is always look at your personal life. Look at your personal life, look at your lived experiences, look at the things that kept you up at night, or the things that fueled you in your life. And that's where you sort of start, that's where you get your interest. So, sure, I have experienced anti-Black racism as a Black woman. I have experienced anti-Black racism mixed with homophobia as a Black queer woman. I've experienced size discrimination as a fat woman, you know what I mean? I've experienced class barriers and economic discrimination, having come from a working class family. So all of these pieces, sort of create a blueprint for the things that matter the most to you, and the things that get you real angry and in moments of anger, also inspire you into action.
For sure, yeah. How has your work, changed in light of COVID-19?
Jeez. Well, first of all, I can't stand Zoom. I will say that.
Me either.
I'm not the whole Zoom piece, the loss of that physical interaction, the loss of the ability to really be able to read people's body language, and those silent interactions that happen, now we're sort of guarded by this yellow border, as to when to talk, when not to talk. So Zoom has certainly been something to get used to, I also think that it's, someone said it really well, that we are not working from home, but we're trying our best to work during a pandemic, Yeah. And I think that's an important distinction, because I started to see some patterns popping up on social media as this pandemic was, as it was unveiling itself. And these themes are around, make sure you're so productive, make sure you get everything done. Now you have all this time at home, and do, go, be the best, and this and that and everything. And while I understand productivity is important, I also think that we have to sit and realize that this is a pandemic, and we're all kind of managing, at different places on the mental health spectrum. Even as an MPP, some days I get up and I am legitimately exhausted, before I even get on the screen, because you just know what's going on around the world,
Mhm.
whether from a health perspective, whether from a social justice perspective, or should I say social injustice perspective, so
Sure.
we have to make space, I believe,
Mhm.
for a range of emotions,
Yep.
you know what I mean? Working from COVID, or working through COVID. And
Mhm.
I can certainly say that our communities, have been going through it. Like, I mean, for months and months, people have been struggling to pay their rent since this pandemic hit, people losing their work, being laid off, and struggling hard to get direct funding from the province,
Yep.
that we still haven't seen. We're still not seeing rent subsidies for residents, direct rent subsidies. We're still not seeing, any attempts to bring back rent control, for instance.
Mhm.
So, and we're still worried about people, possibly, being hit with thousands of dollars of rent after this pandemic, when people may be taken to court for outstanding debts that they cannot afford because of a pandemic, right? So there's a lot going on. I think, many of our days are longer
Mhm.
with COVID-19,
Yep.
and, you're doing, 3 times more work because, again, you're trying to keep your community as calm, as informed as possible, as engaged, because you can't really, like, I'm not going to events the way I used to, right? I'm
Mhm.
not as free to be in crowds, willy-nilly as I
Mhm.
was.
Mhm.
So, technology, phone calls, emails, heck, even writing letters. I've written a few letters, like literally, and put them in the mailbox. That's the way we have to reimagine communication until it gets to a different day. You
Yeah,
know.
for sure. Um, for another question, what pushed you to co-founder hashtag SizeismSUCKS, and how do
Ah,
you think it impacted our community?
goodness. Well, I mean, first of all, I want to say Sizeism Sucks was something that was created by myself and my partner, Aisha Fairclough. And it was just one of those projects that we did under our banner of Body Confidence Canada. And really it was about addressing, fat hatred. It was about addressing size, weight, appearance-based discrimination,
Mhm.
because from our own personal experience and those of people we knew and interviewed and who have talked to us over the years of this campaign, we know that people who are larger, fat, curvy, plus sized, whatever euphemism you want to use, are often looked upon in a very negative light,
Yep.
especially in the healthcare, sector, where fatness is immediately associated with unhealthy lifestyles or unhealthiness, which of course we know is not the exclusive truth by any means.
Mhm.
So it sort of started off with that work. We also know that people who are fat, similar to people who are racialized, particularly Black people, people who are trans, people whose gender identity and expression may not fit a heteronormative idea of what it should be.
Mhm.
Even things like renting a home, for goodness sakes, people experience discrimination,
Mhm.
to the effect where sometimes people have had to change their appearance, or they've had to bring along a white friend to
Mhm.
rent an apartment,
Yep.
or whatever the case might be, right?
Mhm.
So the work of Sizeism Sucks. We got tens of thousands of signatures on a change.org petition,
Mhm.
and that was great. And we didn't do it alone. I actually have the names of some of the folks who helped me along the way. Haley Rosler from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and you might be wondering, it's actually on my wall. I keep their
Okay.
names on my wall in my home. Cheryl Ann Webster
Mhm.
from Victoria, British Columbia, Connie Levitsky at Edmonton, Alberta, Lindsay Mazur from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and Lindsay has just been a superstar in Winnipeg. Jillian Kilfoyle in PEI had been supportive as well too, and Marnie Prangus Paradis from Whitehorse. So there are a lot of people who have been supportive, you know what I mean, and definitely tried to help us get the word out,
Mhm.
to could change our human rights code to include things like size and weight. So, on a provincial scale, when I came into politics in 2018, I was able to put forth a Bill 61. It wasn't directly linked to sizeism and to my, well, I should say it wasn't directly linked to my work with hashtag SizeismSUCKS, but it was indirectly linked because it was still around body justice and raising awareness and education on body problems or body issues. So Bill 61 was my attempt to get the first week of February recognized as Eating Disorders Awareness Week in Ontario. And it passed second reading, which is a good thing. That doesn't always happen. It passed second reading unanimously. So now it's in a committee stage, kind of like a political purgatory, I call it, and hopefully one day it'll be a law. And what I really tried to tease out in my work on eating disorders in the legislature was I wanted to make sure that people in Ontario knew that, not only are 1 million people approximately dealing with eating disorders in Canada, but about half of those are in Ontario. And it's really important to know that eating disorders, eating problems, body image issues are not a white woman's issue or a white girl's issue. It's not a heterosexual issue. It's certainly not a thin issue. And that there are people who are fat who have eating disorders. There are people who are Black and Indigenous who have eating disorders and body image issues. And oftentimes, the more marginalized the community, that actually increases chances of having body image issues, because really, whether it's disordered eating, whether it's, an eating disorder or whatnot, sometimes that's a reaction. It's a coping mechanism for dealing with society's disorders, and various oppressions and, instances of exclusion that many are dealing with. So it's been an interesting ride in many lives. I feel like a cat sometimes. I am also very obsessed with cats. I love cats, but
really?
I've lived many cat lives.
That's
different lives. Yep.
I think the next question goes to you.
Alrighty, let's see. Next question. Okay, yes. So now it's my turn to interview you.
Yeah.
So tell me about your work in STEM, and maybe you can let all of our viewers know what STEM is and how you got into STEM.
So STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. STEM is important because, essentially science is everywhere in the world around us, and technology is just continuously expanding into every, aspect of our lives. And by exposing kids to STEM, and giving them the opportunities to explore STEM-related concepts, they'll end up developing a passion for STEM, just like I did. STEM activities actually invoke curiosity, which is why I got involved very young. I was always exposed to fun science classes. I was always given lots of books to read, and I was always encouraged to explore my interests, explore my talents. And that same curiosity about science always had me questioning about why people live in poverty, why the homelessness crisis is such a big problem, and why our Indigenous brothers and sisters are faced with so many injustices. And I learned that at a really young age, and that guidance I received is why I am the person I am today, and I obviously want to be able to be that person for someone else.
Yeah. Right on. Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I tell you, I say this all the time, STEM, especially for young women, especially young women of color, Black, brown, racialized women. It is, an area that is stereotypically thought to be male dominated. And while I would say probably is still male dominated, it's certainly a place where we exist. Yeah. And it's a place where we should take up space and do so unapologetically. So it's always good to see folks rising to that occasion. Absolutely.
That actually means a lot coming from you. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. I'm sure you could take me out on STEM subjects any day. But nonetheless, thank you. So what's the motivation for your work? I mean, you kind of hinted to it a bit, putting it out there, making other people see that it's possible. What other motivations do you have for this work?
For me as a kid, I was pretty shy. I wasn't confident at all. I just, kind of like hid under my siblings' shadow because I have a lot of them. And when I started to read and I started to, I guess, learn, stuff in terms of engineering and things, I felt really powerful. Because when you think of engineer, you think of, even when I was a kid, stereotypically, I thought of like a really strong man, super smart. So when I was given the opportunity to go into STEM and learn about STEM things, I just felt really powerful. And I felt, like I could do anything. And that coming from, a little girl who is shy and who, doesn't really, know where she wants to go in life and who she wants to help, it really did put me in a better place. And it did help me understand, why things are going around in the world, like why things are, the way it is. And yeah.
Wow. So how do you deal with those challenges? Because I mean, if we're completely real, right? I mean, obviously, everyone, well, I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of us are pushing towards inclusivity, more equitable practices, and we all know representation matters, right?
Yeah.
But how do you deal with those challenges? Maybe when you're walking into certain spaces and you might be the only person, you might be the only woman, or you might be the only person of color, you know what I mean? Or do you bump up against any of those challenges still? And how do you manage those?
Oh yeah, 100%. There have been a lot of times where I've walked into a room and I was, the only girl, and I've walked into like a design team and I was the only girl. And it was challenging, especially because you can tell that everyone's looking at you and everyone is just undermining you, and they don't really take you seriously. Usually what I do to counteract that is I tend to be, I guess, vocal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always putting my hands up, I'm always throwing out ideas. And I tend to I love to show that I know what I'm doing and I'm not here just because, for fun. Like I'm a leader and I'm here to actually make a contribution. So yeah, that was me. I think that's just kind of my personality. I've always been that person to just push, and now I just I won't, shut up. I'm always talking continuously. So I think that's what helps me move forward.
That is a great thing. Can I tell you, one of the worst experiences I ever had in school, and I remembered this. So I've taken it into the workplace, I've taken it into my new role as an MPP. The
Mhm.
worst experience is when someone asks a question, whether it's your prof or your TA,
Mhm.
or in my case now, the leader of our official opposition, Andrea Horvath. If someone asks a question, someone that you see as a leader, as the person, right? And the answer, and you keep your hand down.
Yeah.
That moment where you're like, well, am I right? Am I sure? Should I say it? No, 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 I'll stay quiet. And then there's always the guy who shoots the hand in the air and says exactly what you're about to say,
Yeah.
and then gets all the praise, And I remember experiencing that in school sometimes, where I'd be like, gosh darn it, I should have just said it. Like I was right, or even if you're not right, raising your hand, taking up space, putting your thoughts out there for your classmates to hear, or now in my case for my colleagues to hear, you know what I mean? It's important.
It is. Yeah.
It's an important way for us to engage,
Mhm.
and for our words to always be taken seriously. Like we have weight behind our words.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we
There's
do.
weight behind our words.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually remember feeling that way a few times, and I think it's just the fear of being called out. Being made, I guess, painted as this girl that doesn't know what she's talking about. So I get that totally, and I feel like it's really in the male-dominated spaces is where we feel that way, and it does suck. But I hope that for the future, we never feel that way, and I don't want anyone to feel that way, for that
Me
matter.
too. Me too. Me too. Whether we're talking up as women, or, sometimes we find ourselves in spaces where when you talk up about racism,
Mhm.
and you're that person of color, or that black person, or brown, racialized, indigenous, whatever, and you're talking about race, and it's like, oh, here comes Sowmiya again, or oh, it's Jill again, you know what I mean? And we
Exactly.
consistently have to push back against that sort of a, that sort of a microaggression that sort of a look sometimes. Sometimes it's just a look that
Mhm.
someone gives in an attempt to try to silence our voice.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, and I usually, when I get that look, and if I ever get that look in any setting, I usually try to look the person straight in the eye to make sure that they know that I know what they're trying to do. And then I keep
Yeah.
talking.
That's how you assert, I guess the dominance like that.
Yeah, there you go.
So one last question. What is the motivation for your work and what keeps you going in spite of, all the challenges that you face?
Oh my goodness. Ah, goodness, what keeps me going? I feel, for every student I've ever taught, for every young person I've ever mentored,
Mhm.
young people really keep me going, to be very, very honest.
Mhm.
I've had some peculiar situations. I've had good ones too, but I've also had some long-lasting negative experiences, in our schooling system, for instance,
Mhm.
being policed in public spaces, in our healthcare system even.
Yeah.
So I just want to work as hard as I can to ensure that, other young people, the children that aren't even born yet, for goodness sakes,
Yeah.
can have a better Ontario, you know?
Mhm.
And obviously I'd be lying if I didn't say that I'm working hard. My mom's a senior. I have many beloved friends who have, Black mothers, who have been nurses, they've been postal workers, they've been essential workers, still going in to this day through COVID-19. Aren't normally at the table,
Mhm. You
and
kind
the
of
idea is for us to keep bringing more chairs to the table. You know what I mean? And when necessary, create our own table.
Mhm. Sorry,
Thank
you
you.
kind of cut out there.
Oh, sorry.
After your nursing home, sorry, your mother, she is
Ah,
still.
my mom. Yes, no, I was saying, you asked, what are some of the motivations, and I was just saying,
Mhm.
my mom is a senior citizen, so I'd be lying if I said that she's in a big motivation, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
And also I think of my beloved friends, you know what I mean, who
Mhm.
have moms who have been nurses, PSWs, postal workers,
Yeah.
you know, house cleaners,
Yeah.
who have been, you know, um, who have worked so hard for us to have a chance to
Exactly.
have the lives that we have now. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I'm working for everyone, but absolutely, I am also especially working for those, who have really shouldered the weight
Mhm.
of Ontario. You know what I mean? And the people whose voices need to be heard the most and the loudest
Yeah.
and the most often without interruption. You know?
I love that. Yeah, that's amazing. Um, that actually concludes our interview. I just like to add that I'm so grateful that you decided to take your time. I know you're really busy. I could hear all the notifications pinging on your laptop. Everyone needs to talk to you. So I'm really grateful that you took the time to come and speak with me. Um, yeah, I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you too. And thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for breaking down barriers and being present in STEM.
Thank you.
Because of you, so many others are going to be in STEM as well too. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I'll see you soon.
Yes, you will. Bye bye.
Bye.
Be
You too.